4 years in Iraq. We were a little under 4 years in World War II, and it's getting worse. Now, the administration believes that we can still win that war, and we need more troops in there, and we need more money in there. I don't think that's true. I think it's a civil war, and I think it's going to have to be waged by people in the country, by the Iraqis, and someone is going to emerge from a civil war as the winner of the civil war. Most likely it's going to be the Shiites, but I don't think Americans can win that war. You wanted my views.
That's very good. Thank you.
Well,
Now
for what they're worth.
Well, I have 2 questions related to the subject. Do you have confidence in the national security agencies that they are doing all possible in this situation?
Here is the situation. We have been prepared to wage conventional war. Our Air Force is magnificent, Navy and United States Air Force. Our troops were trained along conventional lines, but and I'm going to come back to the intelligence now in a minute, the National Security Agency. But that war is not a conventional war. On the contrary, it's the opposite of a conventional war. We were not trained to fight that kind of warfare. We're still not trained to fight that kind of warfare. Now back to intelligence. I believe in what the National Security Agency does. I think they're good. But so much of what's happening in Iraq is face-to-face, person-to-person, voice-to-voice, door-to-door, neighborhood-to-neighborhood. And you may have satellites in the air, that can get intelligence all over the place. But it's not geared for unconventional warfare. So we're in a warfare that's dragging out because we're not prepared to fight that kind of war, and we still aren't. There's some real issues about our troops there. Are they getting the proper equipment, personal equipment, the proper vehicles that are armored, protected? It's a kind of war where, our troops, so many of them, that are thousands and thousands, are losing legs and arms and parts of their bodies. It's not like a big bomb dropping, wiping out whole sections of a country or a city. So the national security, now we'll come back to your question. It's a long way to get there, but the National Security Agency is good. Like our military, they're in the process of adapting, of changing. They had gone very largely over to satellite intelligence. We had lost what we used to have in terms of human intelligence, ground-to-ground, face-to-face kind of infiltration. So we're having problems there.
Do you feel like we're building that back up to meet the situation?
Slowly. Slowly. Meanwhile, the war is now over 4 years. We've lost 3,200 lives, and about 25,000 troops have been wounded, about 10,000 so seriously they can't go back to active duty. So it's a real question. I told you how I feel as one individual,
yes.
But America is torn, almost evenly divided about should we be there, should we get out of there. More Americans feel now, about 56, 57%, that we should not have gone there in the first place. But that's happened in the past, I'd say, 6, 8, 9 months a year.
To feel both sides of this issue, do you not feel like that our country or our administration chose this route as a response to our attack in New York City? Not knowing the enemy, you go out looking for an enemy to kick back at.
Now you're asking me good questions, and I'm an individual.
I
have a military background, but I'm giving you one person's opinion.
Absolutely.
When
Understood.
when 9/11 occurred, our response was to go after the perpetrators of 9/11, and those perpetrators were located in Afghanistan. So we were waging in Afghanistan the right war. And at that time, our leaders said at the national level, you know, you can run, leaders, Al-Qaeda, but we're going to find you. You can't hide. We're going to get you. So we started out waging the right war. And suddenly, we shifted over from the right war to Iraq. And when we did that, it distracted us from the real war, which was against Al-Qaeda. Now, Al-Qaeda has been using, and is using Iraq as a training area, a training ground for people who can go out throughout the world and perpetrate immense losses on us and others. So we started out reacting to what happened in New York City, 9/11, and then we got distracted. Now, as a consequence of that, we said, if you recall very loudly, our president did, bin Laden, you can run, but you can't hide. Now, he'd been running for over 4 years, and he's doing a pretty good job of hiding. Al-Qaeda is building back up in Afghanistan. We have devoted and diverted so much money and so many troops and so much energy into Iraq that it has detracted from the war on terror worldwide. And we got detracted from our main mission, get them in Afghanistan.
I want to explore just a little bit before we close our interview what you perceive to be the war of the future to be like. What are wars in the future going to be like?
I think we have to be prepared for what we call conventional warfare, which is use of aircraft, the air forces, large armies and so forth. But we have to prepare also, and we need that, and we need that in reserve. I think the main wars of the future are going to be what we're experiencing right now. They're going to be more one-on-one, house-on-house, neighborhood to neighborhood. Al-Qaeda does not have the resources, and in the foreseeable future will not have the resources to, and have no intention, by the way, of trying to match us aircraft for aircraft and army for army. So we have to retool, and we have to go about war over the world in an entirely different way, in an entirely different manner. And that's what it's going to be likely in our lifetime.
It sounds to me like you're saying that World War II was the last big popular war, that from now on it's not going to be the same big win in any situation in the world.
But look at what happened after World War II. Just a few, that was, World War I was the war to end all wars.
Oh, yeah.
World War II was the war to end all wars. World War II ended in 1945. 1950, we were back in another war in Korea. We didn't know how to wage that war. That became an immensely unpopular war. As a matter of fact, President Truman chose not to run. It was so unpopular. And Dwight Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, ran. And one of his major platforms was, I'll end the war in Korea. I'll get us out of Korea. Well, we wound up partitioning Korea, North and South. And some people think we won because they didn't get South Korea. Some people think we lost because we didn't unite Korea. However you feel, it was an immensely unpopular war. The American people were unhappy with that war. It dragged on for several years. We won out. The American people forced the issue, and Eisenhower became president and concluded the peace treaty there. Then we started building up in the 60s, the next decade, in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, and we kept building up and building up and building up, and it divided the American people, very much divided. It became a war that was hated, one we needed to get out of, and President Johnson chose not to run for a second term, and his successor, the next president, came in with a promise to get us out of Vietnam. In 1975, we got out of Vietnam. We got out and turned Vietnam over to the communists. Of question is, should we have been there in the first place? Should we have been building up the way we did? It was a war we didn't understand. We didn't know how to wage. We lost over 50,000 men here. So that was the second immensely unpopular part. And now we find ourselves today in a very similar situation with a war that has become very unpopular. Many of us believe is unwinnable. And the American people now, about 57, as I said earlier, 57% or 58%, believe we need to get out of there.
This is like...
Did that answer your question?
That's a very good answer, and it leads me to another question.
Yeah, okay.
Was our commitment to these unpopular wars not sufficient to gain us victory? Or was it that we were too afraid to use the big weapons that would have done like we did to Japan to say we had a victory? Were we not committed to the principle that we were fighting for?
I think initially we were. But when we were not successful in waging those wars, and they began dragging out, our commitment to them began to wane. And then, over time, most Americans became unhappy with the wars because they couldn't see an end to them. And it was draining. You can talk about money, but mainly it was draining American lives. Mm-hmm. So I think initially there was a pretty good commitment to them.
Well, if we had the commitment to them and being probably the largest military power in the world, why could we not win it? Were we not willing to commit the acts of killing human beings that would bring victory?
Well, let's apply that to Iraq. We have all kinds of nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. We have all kinds of aircraft that are just so sophisticated. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable what they can do to deliver weapons of mass destruction. We have the ability to wipe out every city in Iraq, wipe it off the face of the earth. But we don't want to do that. We still are a moral nation, and the war is not being fought like that. If you use modern weapons in Baghdad, for example, you're wiping out good folks as well as bad folks. So we can't use those. So the thing is dragging on in a form of warfare we don't understand. We haven't retrofitted to wage, and the American people are tired of our losing these lives, and primarily losing these lives and tearing up the bodies of so many thousands of young Americans. And then I think thirdly, tired of spending, let's say, $9 billion every month, over $100 billion a year. We've spent over $400 billion in Iraq. So what happened is, initially the American people, because of our leaders, believed that was the right thing to do to go to Iraq. And then gradually they began to realize, look, there were no weapons of mass destruction. They didn't have the ability to threaten the United States. There was no tie-in with Al-Qaeda before there were Al-Qaeda there now. So this drain of human lives and human limbs, and then thirdly, money, but that's a poor third, it's lives and limbs, has taken its toll on the American people. So I think the ability in these wars started out supporting our president and our leaders, but it then began to wane. You know, over 4 years in Iraq, we won World War II.
So our country's still grappling with the war mentality, to prepare for war, to be able to endure war, and when to wage war. These are issues that our country will continue to grapple with for many, many years. And we appreciate so much your overview, your personal insight from your experience, and the time you've given us today. Thank you, Colonel Ramey.
Let me tell you, while I was reluctant to do this, I appreciate what you're doing and recording history, because there are very few of us. I'm 81, but I was one of the younger people in World War II, and I really appreciate what you all are doing in this project.
Well, thank you for your service.
It's my pleasure.